Fantastic. Thanks for joining me, Andrew. Lovely to see you again, as always.
Pleasure, Alex.
So yeah, this is part of our series about AI adoption in the built environment, and so you'd be an ideal person to pick your brains. We're actually doing it in partnership with the Red Foundation, who
Oh,
are
right, okay.
a not-for-profit organisation. You might have come across it before. Focused on data within the built environment and how we use that and that sort of stuff. And part of one of their areas is obviously AI. A friend of mine, Tom Shrive, is the chairman of that committee, and he's done a few of these interviews as well. But yeah, I'd love to get your input on it. So perhaps, Andrew, you could start by just giving us a sort of rundown of your role in the built environment and that sort of stuff, and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course, yeah. No, I currently run the sort of thought leadership area at RICS, looking at AI, data and technology. I've been with RICS for 14 years now. For those of you who don't know RICS, we're a leading professional body in the built and natural environment, over 110,000 members worldwide, and they work right across the whole property and land life cycle, right across all the different asset types. So it's a very privileged role. I work with an informal network of around 300 data and tech firms around the world, which gives me tremendous insight into what's happening in this kind of PropTech space. And I'm also on the ethics committee of the Red Foundation. So as ever, it's a small world.
Oh, there you go. Fantastic. Well, but yeah, so I mean, obviously, you're a perfect person to talk to about this, given your sort of scope and looking at all different aspects of the sort of built environment and the real estate life cycle. So this could be quite a broad answer, but what opportunities do you see for AI integration within the built environment? Are there particular ones that stand out to you?
I suppose, ironically for me, it's a difficult question to answer, in the sense that if I look at the whole kind of life cycle of land and property, I see opportunities at every stage for every asset type. And I think we've also, perhaps understandably, got not so much carried away, but the focus over the last couple of years, since November 2022, has been so much around generative AI, ChatGPT, and others, in terms of the revolution they've brought, not only just, I think, in technological perspective, but also the fact that it's democratized AI. We all now have AI on our mobile phones, on our desktop, with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, or Llama. And ironically, AI has been around a lot longer than that. And so what I've seen over the last few years, even before ChatGPT and others, has been the fact that the machine learning has been out there under the bonnet, behind the scenes, doing things all the way from looking at satellite imagery for crop health and land management, through planning and development, pulling together lots of powerful data sets for land acquisition, doing automated valuation. So I almost cop out answer here by saying, actually, I can see it at every stage of the property life cycle. We all know that there's a lot of AI being used to monitor HVAC and make HVAC will work much better in terms of commercial buildings, in terms of power management and reducing carbon output. So I can see not only this brave new world of generative AI, which is a much more kind of horizontal tool for document management, producing images, working with spreadsheets, all these kind of tasks that are almost quite generic. So I see generative AI literally helping us with all those kind of generic business issues, project management, et cetera, all the way across the life cycle. Then I see these particular niche pieces of AI, whether it's computer vision to look at defects. People are running drones up and down buildings and taking photographs of the buildings so they can look at images to automatically detect common defects in the facades, all the way through to, as I say, automated valuation. So it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but there's opportunities everywhere.
Yeah, I suppose it's the generative AI and the chat GPTs and Copilot and etc. that have brought it to the masses.
Exactly.
And we can use it in everyday life, and um, I suppose that's been quite an eye opener for lots of people, and created the hype curve or whatever.
Exactly.
How far way up we are. I mean, have you encountered any challenges in terms of AI being incorporated into work processes within the built environment, I suppose? Have you seen?
I think that the challenges that I've seen and will remain are, and I use this particularly around the kind of the generative AI tools is that there's a degree of kind of seduction that the output looks correct when it may not be. So I think for me, the challenges are, well, there's two challenges. I can wind back to an earlier one, which is making sure we have our data in the correct state so that when these models are trained and when we're building particularly bespoke models, we've got the right kind of data to train them on. But I think that the biggest problem for me is that kind of human machine interface and making sure that actually we're not seduced into thinking that the output from any form of AI is 100% correct when it could be 100% wrong or in the middle. So I think the real challenge for us is this interpretation using AI as an augmentation tool, but making sure we don't lose sight of the fact that, particularly representing the profession I represent, we're giving reasoned, trusted advice that's accurate.
Yeah, you can definitely imagine that. You could quite easily see that happening, can't you? I mean, the hallucination, that 1% or 2% or whatever, either end of the its suggested answer. If you put any sort of maths equations into ChatGPT, that's not how it works. It predicts, doesn't it, in terms of how it operates, the likely outcome rather than doing a
Well,
calculation.
yeah,
So
I mean, it's
quite
that
easy
form
to
of,
see the
I
errors.
mean,
I've seen it
that
loads of times.
that form of AI is by definition probabilistic, which means it's making the best,
Yes.
probabilistic
Yeah.
output. And yeah, in many cases, it may be incredibly correct and hugely useful. But I think the key is making sure that we have people who can interpret that output to make sure it is actually correct. And, example might be that, AI, both generative and more traditional, can read a lease, and it could come out with some very powerful conclusions about what you can and cannot do with that property based on the lease. But there will still be situations where that will either have been pulled out wrong, and or you still need a human being to read the lease in detail to make sure that the right advice and the right decisions are made.
So you need the quality check done by a
Yeah,
human
yeah,
ultimately. Yeah. Well, it gives us more time to be doing that, I suppose, doesn't
it
it?
does.
Um, Obviously, you've looked at loads of different techs, as you said, like 300 different prop techs, maybe, and what are the most, or can you highlight some of the most exciting AI applications you've seen?
Um, it is hard to choose. I mean, I am particularly impressed by this ability to perhaps do things that we couldn't do before. And I would use that example again of drones that not only can be using
Mhm.
AI to control them in some way, but also that computer vision where you can actually begin to inspect large amounts of real estate in a much more systemic way, but more frequently than you perhaps could do with human beings, and that you can use that then to, as I say, interpret images and do it hand in hand with a surveyor. So I mean that's one example. I think in
Mhm.
many respects, if I think of the generative AI, some of the kind of generic applications in terms of document management, summarizing complex documents. I've seen some very impressive work around the planning process, which I think a lot of knows, involves lots of documents, lots of submissions, lots of reports. And I've seen some very impressive use of generative AI to really help people document and summarize a large number of documents in a planning application, for example. So I think I've certainly seen a number of things. And I say once again, although very prosaic and very well established now, the savings that people are seeing by using machine learning to control their HVAC are very impressive. When you tie that in with motion sensors and other kind of IoT devices to manage your building in a much smarter way, there's a lot of money still left on the table for the built environment to run those assets much more efficiently.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that ESG was the buzzword before AI,
Yeah,
maybe. So, but those two aligned is, you can see that benefit, and there is obviously a massive need for us to, manage our carbon output and look after the planet as a whole, and the built environment, as we know, has contributes a lot to that. So, you can see how AI has the capability to have a massive impact there, in terms of managing how we use that energy within especially commercial buildings, where you think there's a lot of opportunity, or mismanaged commercial units, maybe because they don't have that capability at the moment. So yeah, that's exciting, definitely. Um, what about looking? Well, no, actually, before we look ahead, actually, what do you think about the impact of AI on roles and people? There's a big thing that people are worried about their job. Yeah.
I think they certainly are, and that's not a unique concern for our sector. I think every sector is looking at AI and thinking, what does this mean? Does this mean fewer people? Does this mean changes to roles? I mean, I remain hopefully a kind of glass half full guy on this, on the sense that, as I've intimated, earlier in our chat, you need not only a human in the loop, as it were, but you need somebody who actually knows the context of what you're managing here. So, if you're going to look at the output of an AI model that's telling you something about a planning application or the contents of a lease, that human in the loop needs to really understand from first principles, how does the planning system work? How do leases work? So it's not that we just need some supervisor in that sense. So we still need highly skilled property professionals who understand all the idiosyncrasies of what is a very heterogeneous, varied asset type. So in that role, I see the need for really highly trained, highly experienced property professionals with critical thinking, analytical problem solving skills as almost being more important now, because we're going to be effectively
High value, yeah.
guardians of these AI tools. I guess the other side of that is that there'll be a lot of tasks that now can be safely automated. And so I think what it will do is certainly reshape some of the roles that are perhaps arguably considered perhaps more junior now, number crunching, moving bits of data around, copying and pasting between spreadsheets, or indeed part of our normal working day that would have been doing that, where AI will undoubtedly be a kind of force multiplier. It will be a productivity gain. I think it'll be used hopefully to do the more mundane, repetitive tasks. So it will free up time for both seasoned professionals and arguably reshape perhaps the number or the role profile for our more junior staff. But our more junior staff still need to learn through experience and exposure to projects and to people and to stakeholders how to do the job from first principles, so they can then be that senior partner later in life. So I think it will reshape roles. I'm mindful of one session that I saw from a very large international property consultancy where they said, yeah, we think this is going to make our people more productive. They're effectively going to have to spend less time doing things, but we are short of people. So this simply will mean that we can do the things we want to do with the number of people that are in the marketplace. So they had a very positive attitude that actually this simply meant they could address some of the skill shortages by not wasting time doing menial tasks.
I totally agree, and I do, from with my expertise in that in the talent field, I do think, we've had a talent shortage for a long time, and okay, the market's a little bit more there's more people out there at the moment. It's still not very high compared to what you normally see, and the population, the birth rates are dropping in the Western world and that sort of stuff. So you can see this talent crunch on the horizon. So, if we can become more productive per head, then that makes loads of sense. But going back to your earlier point in terms of, training, obviously, you can see how well there's the potential or a negative potential where, if you're not being exposed to doing these more menial tasks or, getting your head around those early on, will you be skilled enough to be that person overseeing it later? But I suppose you could flip it and say, well, if we've got all those tasks being done by AI automated, then you could spend more time at university or not, or
Well,
on
yeah,
training and developing skills.
exactly. And my view is that the trap we mustn't fall into is that we mustn't de-skill that next generation. So for me, it's a case of learn how to do this stuff from first principles, then delegate that to AI. But don't miss out that critical step of saying, okay, how to value something from first principles, how to read a lease from first principles. Embed those skills. Maybe AI can help you learn those skills, but embed those skills in the next generation. So yes, they may be junior. They know how to do that stuff. They've been tested. They can, when they need to, they can do it from first principles, but then they delegate that task to AI and then learn those critical thinking skills to be that professional skeptic. But let's not miss out that step. Let's not jump straight to abdicating responsibility to AI for these tasks. So valuers need to be trained to value from first principles. Asset managers need to learn how to read a lease, learn those basic skills, those fundamental skills, and then yes, abdicate a degree of that to your automated AI bot. But don't forget that you need to learn from first principles how to do this stuff. And property is still very much a people business as well. There'll be lots of soft skills we still need in terms of stakeholder management and that sort of thing.
I think, like you said, in terms of the skills of overseeing the decisions, there's also, the human skills of interaction and empathy and actually, that might have a much higher value as well for the same reason,
Indeed.
it's like, so, that could be really powerful. And then also I also think about skilling up in terms of the you maybe how you utilize AI. If you're thinking maybe you manage a team or something like that, now you might have a team of AI sort of capabilities. So how do you, as an individual in your role, make the most of AI? How do you skill yourself up to utilize AI really effectively? Would be something that I would advocate everyone needs to be.
Oh yeah, and in that sense, I mean, when I speak externally, I always advocate that people must, sounds silly to say play around, but they must embrace these tools. They've got to learn what these
Got
tools are
to.
good at, what they're bad at, and then say, okay, when's the most appropriate time to use these tools for what tasks? Not abdicate responsibility as we've discussed, but no, I think the profession, the sector could arguably be criticised for being a bit conservative over the years, but I think this is an opportunity for us to get our data in a good shape, embrace these tools because they will present productivity gains for us, and we'd be mad not to embrace them and use them in the same way that we've used Excel and Word and pocket calculators and every other tool that's appeared over the years.
Yeah, exactly. So looking ahead, I know we've touched on a few things there, but you say 5, 10 years time, what are the sort of crazy things that, or the most impactful things that we might see from AI? Is it?
I suppose in a funny way, the most impactful thing I would imagine would almost be the real estate sector kind of reimagining some of the ways it does things so that actually the AI might be a catalyst to rethink some of the processes, some of the ways of working that actually could be reassessed and redesigned, and that then AI helps us be more productive to do that. I think
Mm,
it will remain, as I said earlier on, a fairly idiosyncratic asset type. We've got lots of jurisdictional laws and planning regulations and custom and practice that means it's hard sometimes to scale some technologies. But I would hope actually that one of the most fundamental things that we'll see that's different is ironically not AI itself, but just the broader digitization of the sector in terms of the way we manage and curate data, moving away from documents to more kind of structured data. We'll have documents that we read, we'll have documents that we use to communicate, but we've not been good very well as a sector in the way that we're not particularly digital. It's run on PDFs and spreadsheets and lots of unstructured siloed data. So I think because it's such a prerequisite for high quality AI, that I would hope that what we really see is this continuation of this journey of a more digital sector using data in a more mature way, and dare I say it, overcoming some of the behavioral issues around sharing data because we don't share data well as a sector. And I think there'll be some external drivers that will force us to share data. We mentioned ESG earlier. If you look at the European landscape with the building performance directive, that's going to force reporting on a lot more legal entities that own real estate. So I think there'll be some drivers there, whether it's retrofit, whether it's financial system reporting on ESG. I would hope that we would share data more, and that data would be in a better state so that we can make more intelligent decisions. A lot
mm.
of real estate still is kind of decisions are made up on gut feeling, which is great, lots of experience, grey hairs, but we could be a more digital sector. And I think hopefully AI will be like a reverse catalyst, or not a reverse catalyst, but it will be
I know what you
a
mean.
driver to. So AI won't be so much the issue. It's just that we've digitized the sector in a really good way.
Yeah, I think I felt that as, but it was something that came up in another conversation actually. But yeah, it's sort of two angles of that. Sort of, there's a lot of regulation, differing regulation across regions and that sort of stuff. And AI may be able to sort of bridge the gap between those. But also, the fact it's sort of embedded in that generative AI being embedded in your day-to-day life, that expectation is also there. So a cultural shift might be taking place with everyone within it, where you're going, well, actually, this is what I'm doing this in everyday life, so surely it should be utilized, in my work, in my working environment. And so hopefully it will drive that digital transformation, as we discussed. What about ethical and practical considerations, Andrew? What do you think, in terms of AI and adopting AI technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a big piece because one very quickly gets dragged into the bits and the bytes and the technology. But I think one of the big issues for me is that actually they joke that, to err is human, to really mess things up, you need a computer. So I think we do need to think about, the implications of automating decisions, particularly when they affect individuals, but also obviously, corporate entities when we're offering advice as a sector. So I think we've got to think very carefully about, and one of the key things I would highlight here is the ability to explain how AI has perhaps made a decision. If we're thinking about using AI to make a decision that affects one of our clients, or as I say, private individuals, I think we have to be very clear about the level of risk and the kind of impact that decision would make on that entity, whether it's individual or corporate. And I think it's beholden on not just our sector, but every sector to realize that they should be able to stand behind that decision and explain how they've come to it. And one of the challenges with many forms of AI is they become a kind of a black box that, you get the answer, but you can't really explain why you came to that. And in the real world, if I use valuation as an example, our members are providing valuations for investment purposes, tax purposes, lots of different purposes, and they have to stand behind their opinion. And simply saying, well, the computer said it's worth £5 million is probably not a sufficient explanation for
No.
either your client or indeed your PII insurer. So joking aside, we've got to think about, to use the jargon, the level of explainability of the decisions that we use AI to make or partly make for us in terms of some of the inputs to one of our decisions, whether it's a schedule for dilapidations or for preventative maintenance or for early cost advice or for evaluation. So I think we need to think about that explainability, but also be transparent with our stakeholders that we're using AI. If we create some content that we publish, or we create an image of an asset, or we produce a valuation, or we produce some advice on cost, we should be very clear with our clients how have we used AI as part of that? And once again, be able to stand behind our opinion, explain how the model works to some degree, explain what the
To a
rationale
level,
is.
a reasonable level, yeah.
So I think for me, it's about doing the right thing, understanding the risks. And it's one thing to have an algorithm that is a black box that controls your heating and your ventilation. As long as everybody's the right temperature and it saves you money, you probably can not worry too much about the algorithm. But if it is making a decision on which option to approach for a costing, evaluation, whatever it might be, I think clients deserve to understand how that decision was arrived at. And also, there's just the simple reality of reliance and PII that, we need to be able to defend our decisions and know that we've given the best advice and not just taken the output of a computer that's blind. And certainly, if it's a firm that's developing their own AI, they've got to think very carefully, where did the data come from? Is it an appropriate, data set for the job at hand? So that there
Has it been trained properly?
Yeah, exactly. Has it been trained on the right sort of data for that task? So there are certainly some ethical decisions. And we've also got to think about the sustainability issue. I mean, if you have a conversation with a typical generative AI product for a few minutes, you've probably used half a litre of water. So it's not just the energy. These things don't exist in cyberspace. They're in a big data center somewhere, being heated and cooled and fed with electricity. So not everything probably needs AI, if I'm honest.
Yeah, exactly. Need it to make every decision for you.
Yeah.
And finally, what advice would you give to others in the field who are looking to explore or expand their use of AI?
I think, as I mentioned before, we need to embrace it and, quote, play around with it. What I would also say is, in some respects, forget about AI and forget about tech and think about, what are you trying to make better? What are you trying to fix? What kind of processes could you make better? What are the business issues you have, rather than just thinking, oh, let's get some AI in. Think about some stuff that really would help your business, help the service you provide your clients, make you more productive, free up time for higher value tasks. But think about it from a business perspective, not, oh, it must be AI. Let's get some AI in to do something.
You don't do it for the sake of it. Actually know what the purpose of it.
Tech should be a means to an end, not an end in itself.
Mm.
And it may well be your solution isn't AI, it's some more traditional piece of automation. But think about your business. Think about how you want to make your business better, how you make the business is better for your clients, and then think, okay, is there some AI out there that could help us?
Perfect. That's great. Andrew, thanks so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Wonderful to have your input, so thank you.